Hi guys, my name is Carissa Beard, and I was a student at Pensacola Christian College, PCC, from the fall of 1996 through the spring of 1999 when I graduated with my bachelor's. And I really wanted to put together this video as a response to some of the videos that Dale Fincher has put out in the past week. And what I wanted to focus on in this video is to talk about how shaming is a part of the culture of PCC. For those who don't know, shaming is a psychological technique, and it's a tactic that is used to make other people feel unworthy. And if you feel unworthy, then you're more likely to defer to the other person. And shaming can be very overt, and it can also be very subtle. It can be as subtle as a look or a glance, an unpleasant tone of voice. You hear this in rhetorical comments, in sarcasm. And basically, whatever type of shaming is going on, the point of it is to make somebody feel ashamed for challenging the system, for challenging the person. And so in that sense, it's a very effective way to make the victim of the shaming feel very inadequate, and therefore to fall into line so that their behavior follows the rest of the dynamic of the group. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. When I was a sophomore at PCC, there was a new style of shoes that came out that fall, and we would call them clogs, or maybe slides, but they were a closed toe shoe that also was backless. And this was significant because even though we were in Florida, we were not allowed to wear flip-flops to our classes. We could wear flip-flops to the beach, but we couldn't wear them to our classes. And in fact, you had to wear pantyhose in Florida, and you also had to wear some type of a dress shoe. Well, once a lot of girls started buying these clogs, and the administration, the Dean of Women's Office, noticed that there were several girls that had these shoes, there was an announcement that was made on our hall one evening that you were no longer going to be allowed to wear these shoes, that they were deemed inappropriate for class. And you might think, no big deal. But for me, it was a really big deal because I have bone spurs on the back of my heels. And so the clogs offered me a dress shoe that didn't irritate my bone spur. At the time, I was actually seeing a podiatrist on a regular basis. I was getting injections of cortisone in my heel to help with the swelling of the tendon back by my my bone spur. And so by not being allowed to wear shoes that didn't hurt and having to do a lot of walking on the campus, I just found that to be a very unpalatable rule. So I actually went to my doctor, and as a 19-and-a-half-year-old, almost 20-year-old woman, had to ask for a permission note to not have to be able to wear a particular style of shoes to my college, which he thought was really weird and bizarre as he wrote the note. But he did give that to me. And I dutifully turned it in to the Dean of Women's Office, and I kind of thought that was going to be the end of the matter. But about a week later, after I had turned in my note, I was sitting in my English class. And as I was sitting in class, a runner from the dean's office brought over a call slip and walked into my college lecture hall, interrupted the professor, and handed me this call slip that basically said, as soon as class is over, you need to come to the Dean of Women's Office. We need to talk to you. And that's, basically all it said. You have no idea what they want to talk to you about. And I had no concept that this was anything about my shoes, but which is what it ended up being. Anyways, after he left the classroom, there were just all these little whispers that you could hear all around you, because everybody was discussing, I wonder what she did, so now she has to go to the Dean of Women's Office. And as I sat in class, I was very fearful of why I might be being asked to go to the Dean of Women's Office, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I've done anything. had no clue why I might be going up to the Dean of Women's office. And really the general tenor of the campus was, if you were going to the Dean of Women's office, this was probably not a good thing for you. So anyways, after class, I went to the Dean of Women's office, and I sat out in the waiting room there and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I have to wonder if that's a tactic that they like to use, because the first question that she asked as I came into her office after I was called back was, is there anything that you want to tell me about? Or I think the next thing she phrased it was, is there anything that you feel like you need to confess? And I'm sitting there going, I don't think so. Well, she proceeded to tell me that they had had several girls who had gotten these fake notes from their doctors, and so that I needed to be able to prove that I had a legitimate medical need for my note. And so I replied, that yes, of course I did. She could call my doctor's office. She'd come with me on my next visit to get my next shot. And that seemed to satisfy her. But when I left her office, really thinking, kind of mulling over the way that my day had gone, and I really felt guilty that I was causing so much trouble on the campus, that I was somehow a bad person because I needed a medical note, because I just couldn't go along with everything. Because one of the things that she said to me as I sat in her office was that that we shouldn't make waves. We don't need to rock the boat. And that's what I was doing by having a note, a medical need, that I was causing the general way that the campus was being run. It was putting waves into that. And so I felt a lot of guilt about the fact that I have a bone spur on my heel, something that was completely out of my control. And that's what shaming does. Shaming makes you feel bad for something that is out of your control, something that you either did or don't do. But because something that is part of your person doesn't conform to the whole group, that shaming makes you feel bad. It makes you feel guilty. I experienced fear. I experienced guilt over nothing, over a bone spur that I couldn't do anything about. And so that's a really small example of what shaming does, and how shaming was a part of that campus. And an even more, now I don't have a personal experience with this, but an even more dangerous form of shaming was what they called shadowing. And shadowing is what happened when you accumulated too many demerits and you were forced to move out of your dorm room. You were going to be kicked out, but your parents hadn't come to get you yet. And so for however long until your parents could get you off of campus, then you had to remain in 24-hour contact with a floor leader. You were not allowed to talk to anyone else. You could only talk to the floor leader. You had to follow the floor leader around, go to all their classes. And everyone would look at that person and be, I wonder what they did. And everybody, I can remember watching people that were being shadowed, and they were, with different floor leaders, and you knew that that's what was going on. And I can remember thinking, I wonder what they did. And in my head, I thought to myself, they must be such a bad person. And that's shaming. That's shaming. Another form of shaming that was used on a regular basis on the PCC campus was socialing. And socialing is when a boy and a girl have committed some sort of infraction, usually involving some kind of physical contact, because physical contact between people of opposite sex on the Pensacola campus was explicitly not permitted. So if you were boyfriend and girlfriend, you couldn't hold hands, you couldn't kiss, you couldn't even brush fingertips. He couldn't, if you were to fall down, he would not be allowed to offer you his hand to get back up again. That's that would get you possibly socialed. And if you were socialed, it would be from like a week to 2 weeks, maybe longer. But you would not be allowed to speak to anybody of the opposite sex. So if you went to class and you sat down and you were a girl and there was a boy sitting next to you, you would not be allowed to speak with him, and this, vice versa. If you were a boy, you were not going to be allowed to speak with girls. And so, you know, it really draws to mind like images from like Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, where Hester Prynne is shamed by wearing this big letter A, you know, and although there wasn't a physical letter S for socialed or S for shadowed, there was certainly this distinction of being singled out for your type of crime. In fact, psychologists call that a shame campaign, and it's used to for everybody else who's watching this to say, you know what, I don't want that to happen to me, so I'm not going to break this rule. I'm going to conform the way that they want me to conform. And it's a very, very damaging thing. And it's such a part of the PCC campus, and it's just part of the culture. And it's part of a lot of our churches that have spiritual abuse in them. And it's just, I just wanted to, I got to wrap this up, but I just wanted to put this out there. Spiritual abuse happens. Spiritual abuse happened on Pensacola Christian College. Spiritual abuse is happening throughout our American churches. And until the spiritual abuse quits happening, this spiritual abuse survivor is going to continue to raise her voice and draw attention to the fact of what has happened and what continues to happen. May God bless you.